I want him to die. He is the one holding our success. Our brother is a ritualist. My pastor told me we won't be able to achieve anything if Andrew remain alive. He needs to die." John snarled, his voice echoing in the room. Andrew grew up in a small, quiet village where resources were few and opportunities even fewer. His parents were farmers, honest, hardworking people who instilled in him the values of resilience and kindness. Andrew's youth was a difficult time. He watched his parents struggle to feed the family, often working long hours in fields under the blazing sun. But his father's words of encouragement stayed with him. Work hard, be honest, and never forget where you come from. With those words as his guide, Andrew set out to make a life beyond the village. As a young man, he journeyed to the city, determined to build a better future. He started with small jobs, working as a laborer and taking any honest work he could find. Every evening, he'd return to his small rented room, aching from the day's labor, but fueled by dreams of success. Over time, Andrew's determination and honesty earned him the trust of local business owners. He saved every penny, sacrificing comforts to build a nest egg, which he eventually invested in a small trading business. Through hard work, sleepless nights, and a keen eye for opportunity, his business grew. Years passed, and Andrew's sacrifices began to bear fruit. He expanded into real estate, building homes for families like his own who dreamed of better lives. His wealth grew steadily, and with it, his desire to give back to the community that had shaped him. For Andrew, success wasn't measured by the size of his bank account, but by the number of lives he could improve. He never forgot his father's words or his roots. Andrew's first major break came when he took a risk that few would have dared. After years of modest success, he poured every penny he had saved into purchasing a large, barren piece of land just outside the city. People thought he was foolish. The land was dry and far from the bustling heart of commerce. But Andrew saw potential where others saw emptiness. He spent months drawing up plans, talking to builders, architects, and planners. He wanted to create a community, a place where people could live affordably but with dignity. Soon enough, buildings began to rise, one by one. Small, affordable homes that would allow families like his own to build new lives. It took years of hard work, but when the project was completed, Andrew became a respected name in the city. With his newfound wealth and reputation, Andrew did not change his humble ways. His mind was focused not on acquiring more, but on sharing what he had. He built a school in his home village, a place where children could learn without having to walk miles. He set up scholarships for young students who couldn't afford college, recalling how much he had longed for an education in his youth. At first, his old friends and family were shocked by the extent of his generosity. The people in the village spoke of him with pride and wonder, often saying, "Andrew may be rich, but his heart is richer still." All the windows named him husband of the widows and a friend to the widowers. Every Christmas season, he would host a gathering for his hometown, traveling back with truckloads of goods to distribute among the villagers: rice, oil, and spices, essentials that helped struggling families make ends meet. He was known not just as a wealthy man, but as a pillar of the community, someone who, despite his fortune, remained deeply grounded in kindness and compassion. But Andrew's life was not without its shadows. His beloved wife, Margaret, was his anchor, his partner, and the love of his life. Together they had built a life filled with laughter, love, and warmth. Their 4 children, Thomas, Clara, Marcus, and little V, were the light of their lives. Andrew found his greatest happiness in his family, who grounded him amid the pressures of business and the responsibilities of wealth. However, tragedy struck one fateful evening. On a quiet, rainy night, as Margaret and 3 of the children drove back from visiting family, their car lost control on a slippery road. In a heart-wrenching accident, Andrew lost all 3 children and his beloved wife. The grief was unbearable, and for a time, Andrew withdrew from everything he had built. The world lost color, and each day felt like an endless, hollow journey through memories that only deepened his pain. For months, Andrew stayed secluded, barely able to face the world. It was his daughter, little V, just a young girl at the time, who brought him back from the edge. Only 13 years old, she had her mother's gentle spirit and her father's unyielding resilience. V's presence was a balm to his broken heart, her innocent laughter and quiet strength a reminder that he still had a purpose, someone to protect, nurture, and love. And so for V, he decided to move forward. Despite his loss, Andrew threw himself back into his work with renewed focus. His community support initiatives grew, with the construction of boreholes to provide clean water, the building of health centers, and scholarships for the poor and orphans. He felt his family's presence in each act of kindness, and in giving to others, he found a way to keep their memory alive. Andrew's fortune, however, did not go unnoticed by his siblings. He had 3 brothers, John, Daniel, and Raymond, and a sister, Sarah. They had all stayed close to the village and shared a more modest lifestyle. Andrew was always generous with them, ensuring they were comfortable, providing for their needs, and even going as far as to build homes for each of them. To him, they were family, and he never thought twice about giving. But as Andrew's wealth grew, so did the simmering jealousy within his siblings. John, the eldest, was particularly envious. He had always considered himself the leader of the family and felt a sense of entitlement over Andrew's success. Daniel, on the other hand, saw his brother's wealth as a shortcut to achieving his own dreams of wealth without the years of sacrifice and labor. Raymond, though less outspoken, was equally resentful, feeling overshadowed by Andrew's generosity. Sarah, the youngest, was perhaps the least envious, but even she sometimes found herself questioning why she hadn't achieved the same level of success. In public, they praised Andrew, always speaking of their benevolent brother, with admiration. But behind closed doors, conversations turned bitter. They convinced themselves that they deserved more, that Andrew's success was a stroke of luck and they deserved to share in his fortune without the effort. The idea that he owed them began to grow, festering silently among them. Yet Andrew remained blissfully unaware of their growing resentment. To him, family was sacred, and he trusted that they held the same values. After all, he had supported them unconditionally, never hesitating to open his heart or wallet for their needs. Even as Andrew's health began to decline, the tension within the family only grew. After decades of hard work, the stress and the pain of his loss had taken a toll on his body. He had noticed a growing fatigue, a weariness that lingered, and eventually it became impossible to ignore. One evening, while working late at his office, Andrew felt an intense pain in his chest. His vision blurred, and he collapsed. His staff rushed him to the hospital, where he was placed under observation. The diagnosis was grave, a heart condition that required immediate attention and prolonged treatment. His energy dwindled, and for the first time, he felt the vulnerability of his own mortality. When V arrived at the hospital, the sight of her father lying weak and pale was a shock she hadn't been prepared for. Andrew, the pillar of strength and generosity, was now dependent on others, and it was a terrifying shift for both father and daughter. Despite her young age, V took on the role of his primary caregiver, staying by his side, bringing him food, and reading to him when he was too tired to stay awake. Meanwhile, Andrew's siblings arrived at the hospital, but their focus was far from Andrew's well-being. They saw his illness as an opportunity, a chance to manipulate the situation to their advantage. They convinced the doctors to inflate medical bills, suggesting unnecessary treatments that drained Andrew's resources more quickly. All the while, they reassured him with words of concern and false promises, claiming they would do everything possible to support him in his time of need. The cost of treatment piled up rapidly, and soon, Andrew was forced to sell off properties and assets to cover the expenses. But no matter how much he sold, the money seemed to vanish as quickly as it came. His siblings were angry. "Does he want to sell off everything before his death?" John, the eldest brother, asked furiously. "If you ask me, who would I ask? I think we need to do something," Raymond said. "Do something like what?" He had sold everything he had, including the local village. Daniel chirped in angrily. "What?" Sarah screamed as her hands went over her head. "Does he want us to die? How could he do a thing like that?" John laughed. "Don't you know that this is how all these ritualists die? They must finish everything they have before their death." "Brother John, I am not in support of this one. Brother Andrew is not a ritualist. We all know how hardworking he is," Sarah stated. "Ta! You are a woman. I blame myself for engaging in a topic with ordinary women that swoop low to urinate. Who is not hardworking? Is it me, Daniel, or Raymond? Tell me. You talk because you have the mouth to talk. John, leave Sarah aside. This is not the reason why we are here, Daniel pleaded. No. Let me tell her that she is a small child and shouldn't talk when elders are talking. Someone has been there making money with your success, and you said he didn't do rituals. We all have been in this city struggling, and year after year, we have nothing to count as our own. We all leave at Andrew's mercy. Did Brother Andrew stop you from making money? Sarah interrupted him. Sarah, if not because you are someone's wife now, I would have given you a dirty slap of your age. I will talk to your husband. It seems like he doesn't know his work as a man, John barked. Sarah wanted to say something again, but Raymond gave her a sign to stop. Sarah stopped and grumbled inwardly. So what are we going to do? Raymond asked again. We can't do anything now. He has sold everything. We just have to wait for his death. Only then can we do something. That's if there's anything left. John stated. He better not die. My husband doesn't have a good job. That Kwashiorkor will kill me and my family, Sarah cried. Let him die so that we can gain our freedom. My pastor said that Andrew, our brother, is our problem, the reason we are not making it. His death will be a liberation to us all. They all nodded their heads in agreement and prayed for Andrew to die first. Perhaps they would be something left behind. They stopped visiting him like they should, and when they visited, their spirits were always not calm. Andrew found comfort in V's steadfast presence. She cared for him selflessly, never complaining or questioning the long hours she spent at the hospital, the sleepless nights. Her devotion reminded him of her mother, and he found himself at peace, knowing he had raised a daughter with a heart as pure as Margaret's. As Andrew's health continued to worsen, he called for his lawyer. He had come to terms with the possibility that he might not survive this illness, and he wanted to ensure V's future was secure. Mr. Andrew told V that he had not sold anything, but he wanted to know how his siblings would treat him in his lowest state. He changed some of the things he wrote in his will and said to the lawyer, "In case I did not survive this sickness." Before he finished, V started crying, telling her father to stop calling death upon himself. Mr. Andrew smiled. He knew that V was a child. She wouldn't understand it. But Mr. Andrew had seen the route the sickness was going to. He cleared his throat and began. In case anything happens, all my wealth belongs to my daughter. She has the right to give to anyone who treats her well. But you must not hand it over to her before her 25th birthday. She must reach 25, understand the intricacies of the world. I struggled so hard to reach where I am today, and I won't be happy to see anyone destroy all I have suffered for in a twinkle of eyes. It took me years of sweat and hard work. The lawyer nodded his head. Mr. Andrew coughed and V handed him a glass of water. Dad, take water. Perhaps you should stop talking. You are stressing yourself out. Mr. Andrew smiled and shook his head. He wasn't stressing himself. It was sickness. V, Mr. Andrew continued, you must make sure that V stays with one of my siblings. Do not reveal all these to them. No matter how they treat her, she must be under my siblings till her 25th birthday. V stared at her father, confused. Why was this man talking in this manner? She kept her cool, staring at them. What if they treat her badly? The lawyer asked. That would be the best. It will push her to know things she shouldn't have known if they treat her well. No matter how bad they treated her, she must live with them. Daddy, but they can't treat me badly. They are our family, V chirped in. Yes, they can't treat you badly, my angel, Mr. Andrews said and stroked his daughter's head. Did you see any of them here? They are no longer taking care of me because I have nothing to give them. They have all started businesses. But look at my daughter, a child. She is the one taking care of me when I have siblings here in this town. Mr. Andrew gnashed his teeth in pain. The lawyer told him to calm his nerves. To V, he left a simple message. Remember, my angel, you carry within you the strength and kindness of those who came before. No matter what happens, hold fast to that, and know that I, your mother and siblings, will always be with you in spirit. At that moment, Andrew understood that his wealth was not in material possessions, but in the legacy of love, resilience, and compassion he was leaving behind. 2 days later, Andrew's journey came to a quiet end in the hospital, with V holding his hand. As life slipped from him, V's heart broke into pieces. She was only 13, and losing her father felt like her world was shattering. Andrew's siblings were quick to take control, but not out of love or responsibility. Their main concern was Andrew's wealth. They gathered immediately after his funeral, not to grieve, but to discuss how they could avoid the burden of V. The family lawyer, a man named Mr. Roberts, was present. He told them that Andrew had nothing left, that he had sold out everything he had. The siblings were outraged. John muttered to himself about what he'd consider a waste of time. And Daniel openly expressed his anger, wondering what Andrew wanted them to train his only daughter with. Raymond, typically quiet, said nothing but gave V a cold look. In the end, after hours of arguing and with much reluctance, John agreed to take V into his home. Even though he didn't want it, his siblings said that it was his duty as the first son to look after V. That day, the image of Andrew's loving family began to crumble for V. She was old enough to sense the animosity, and it shook her. It was then that she remembered what her father told the lawyer on that day. She could feel the sharpness in her uncle's voice, the dismissiveness of her aunt's gaze, and the unkind words whispered in her presence. V's heart hurt with the realization that, aside from her father, there seemed to be no one left who genuinely cared for her. In John's home, V quickly discovered what her father had feared. Rather than being treated with kindness, she was subjected to a life of neglect and resentment. John's wife, Lydia, made it clear from the start that V was an inconvenience. She complained incessantly about the extra mouth to feed and begrudged every penny spent on V's needs. Their two sons, who were close in age to V, picked up on their parents' disdain and treated her with the same cruelty. "I don't want to associate myself with all these ritualists." Lydia always complained. Every morning, V was woken up before dawn to complete household chores. She scrubbed floors, cleaned dishes, and even took on the task of preparing meals for the family. Unlike her cousins, she was denied basic things like new clothes, school supplies, and even sufficient food. Her father's wealth might have once provided for hundreds, but now she was denied even the smallest comforts. School became V's only sanctuary, though John and Lydia made it clear they did not intend to support her education for long. They believed she would eventually drop out and work to support herself, despite her young age. Nevertheless, V clung to her studies, driven by the memory of her father's encouragement and the quiet hope that education could one day help her escape her bleak reality. Despite the hardship, V remained resilient. She spent every spare moment reading, borrowing books from the school library, and trying to keep up with her lessons. Though she couldn't afford school supplies, her teachers noticed her intelligence and provided her with materials. Teachers and classmates alike admired her quiet strength, though few knew the full extent of her hardships. One day, Mr. Roberts, the family lawyer, happened to spot V while she was hawking sachet water on the side of the road. His heart broke seeing her in such conditions, a girl who was supposed to be a child of privilege, now reduced to hard labor. He approached her quietly, buying a sachet of water, and took her aside. They sat on a bench by the roadside, where he asked gently about her life with her uncle. V was hesitant at first, not wanting to complain, but the kindness in his eyes encouraged her to speak. She admitted that life was hard and that her family seemed to resent her, though she stopped short of detailing the full extent of the abuse. Mr. Roberts reassured her that she could reach out to him at any time, reminding her of her father's wishes and encouraging her to hold on. Over time, Mr. Roberts became an unspoken ally for V. Whenever he had the opportunity, he would discreetly slip her books, a small amount of money, or food. He knew that any gifts he gave her openly would be taken by her uncle and aunt, so he acted in secret, keeping her well-being in mind. Years passed, and V grew stronger, both physically and emotionally. Though life with her uncle was painful, it built within her a resilience her father would have admired. Her ability to endure hardship, her intelligence, and her determination became her armor. None of her father's siblings cared for her. They all complained that her father was a wicked man. How could he have sold everything off without considering his siblings' well-being? At first, they said that Mr. Andrew was the one hindering their progress, but after the death of Mr. Andrew, all their businesses died off like when you poured cold water on a glowing ember. Every birthday was marked not by celebration, but by silent reflection on her life, dreams, and the promise of her inheritance. By the time she turned 18, she had learned to survive on her own terms, holding on to the promise of her 25th birthday as the light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Her uncle never thought of celebrating her birthday, but if it was possible, they would celebrate their children's birthday twice in a year. She continued to pursue her studies with a single-minded determination. The school became her refuge, and her teachers became her mentors, guiding her not only in academics, but also in personal growth. Many of them sensed the depth of her struggles and encouraged her to keep moving forward, often reminding her of her potential to change her life's course. At home, however, her uncle and his family continued to heap abuse upon her. They even barred her from further schooling at one point, demanding that she earn her keep instead. With the little money she managed to save from Mr. Roberts and kind strangers, V bought books to continue her studies alone, often spending late nights reading, by candlelight after a full day hawking on the road. John and Lydia dismissed her education as useless, convinced she would never achieve anything beyond menial labor. Yet V remained steadfast, her heart filled with her father's legacy and the dream of one day being free from their control. Finally, the day arrived, V's 25th birthday. The years of suffering had taken their toll on her, but they had also forged a strength and resilience that shone in her eyes. Roberts had carefully prepared for this moment, organizing a grand celebration in her honor, knowing that it would not only mark her coming of age, but also reveal the truth of her inheritance. Her uncles, aunts, and cousins were all present. They allowed V to join them because the family lawyer asked John to bring her. None of them had been told of the purpose of the month gathering. They believed it was simply a birthday celebration of the lawyer's child. Abruptly, they couldn't find V. They searched everywhere, but they didn't see her. John and Lydia swore that they would kill her when they saw her. As they were grumbling, planning on the best punishment for V, the projector came to life, displaying a familiar figure with beautiful write-up. It showcased her resilience, her pursuit of education, and the hardship she had endured. Mr. Andrew's siblings were all confused, speaking with their eyes. "Is that not V on the screen?" They seemed to ask one another. Then V entered the event, feeling out of place in the elegant gown Mr. Roberts had provided for her. Her hands were calloused, her face thin from years of deprivation, but her spirit was unbreakable. The audience watched in stunned silence as the projection ended with the words, "V, the sole heir to Andrew's legacy." Mr. Roberts then addressed the gathering, detailing Andrew's will and confirming that V was now in possession of her father's entire estate. He revealed that Mr. Andrew had not sold any of his property. He was only afraid that his siblings would take everything away from his daughter, and that's why he planned it that way, to know if any of his siblings really cared for him or his daughter. Gasps filled the room as her relatives, who had once dismissed her as a burden, realized the full scope of what they had neglected. They saw with painful clarity the strength and intelligence that Andrew had always seen in his daughter, the qualities that had allowed her to endure and triumph. V took the stage, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her family. She spoke calmly, with the maturity and grace her father had instilled in her. She thanked them for the lessons they had provided, explaining that the hardships had only strengthened her resolve and equipped her for the responsibilities that lay ahead. As she left the event, V knew her journey was just beginning. She was free, standing on her father's foundation, but ready to build her own legacy. Leaving the celebration that night, V felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. She had won back her life and inherited her father's legacy, but her heart carried the weight of all she had endured. The faces of her relatives, wide-eyed in disbelief and shame, flashed in her mind. For years they had looked down upon her, treated her like a burden, and turned her into a servant, hawking along express roads. Yet now, here she was, standing taller than they could ever imagine. With the inheritance, she knew she could finally pursue her own dreams. She could afford the finest education, travel the world, and build the life she had always envisioned. Mr. Roberts, ever the loyal lawyer and family friend, assured her he would help oversee the estate and guide her in the transition to managing her wealth. V took a few months to plan her next steps, embracing the freedom she had long dreamed of. She stayed in the house her father had once called home. It was a sprawling mansion, filled with his memories. She took her time exploring the rooms, recalling childhood memories and discovering parts of her father's life she hadn't known. In his private study, she found a drawer filled with his journals, filled with reflections, life lessons, and messages for her. Each entry felt like a conversation with him, offering her comfort, encouragement, and strength. In one of the journals, he had written, "True wealth is not in the money you possess, but in the character you build and the love you leave behind. Hold yourself to high values and never let anyone dim your light, no matter how hard they try." These words reminded her of the resilience she had nurtured and the kindness her father. V's new journey wasn't just about securing her financial future. It was about honoring her father's legacy and building something meaningful. With her future in her hands, V's first decision was to return to her education. She enrolled in a renowned university overseas, choosing to major in business and finance. She was determined to understand the intricacies of wealth management so she could protect and grow her father's fortune while also using it to help others. University life was a new world for her, but V embraced it fully. She immersed herself in classes, building friendships with people from all walks of life. Many were intrigued by her story, her poise, and her quiet intelligence. Despite the pain she had endured, V exuded a kindness and warmth that drew people to her. She remained humble, never flaunting her wealth, and instead focused on her studies and the values her father had instilled in her. One of her closest friends was a woman named Ava, a fellow student who had also experienced hardship. Ava had grown up in a foster care system, and like V, had learned to navigate life independently. Together, they formed a bond, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating each other's successes. During these years, V also took up various philanthropic projects. Inspired by her father's generosity, she funded scholarships for underprivileged students, invested in community health centers, and started initiatives to provide clean water and education in rural areas. Her work reminded her of the happiness her father had felt while helping others, and she realized that giving back was more fulfilling than anything money could buy. As her 30th birthday approached, V had become not only a successful businesswoman, but a respected philanthropist. She was living proof of resilience and compassion, turning her painful past into a powerful motivator to uplift others. While V had built a fulfilling life on her own, one thing she had not yet found was companionship. Though she had many friends, she hadn't allowed herself to open her heart fully to anyone since her father's death. The wounds of abandonment and betrayal had made her cautious. But one evening, while attending a charity event she had helped organize, V met someone who would change her life. His name was Ethan, a lawyer who had recently returned from working abroad. He was charismatic, intelligent, and most importantly, he possessed a quiet kindness that reminded V of her father's lawyer, Mr. Roberts. Ethan and V found themselves engrossed in conversation that evening, sharing stories of their backgrounds, their passions, and their aspirations. There was a genuine connection between them, a meeting of hearts and minds. They became friends first, often meeting for coffee, discussing life, and even brainstorming ideas for her philanthropic projects. Over time, Ethan's steadfastness and gentle presence softened V's guarded heart. He showed her what it meant to be cherished without conditions. Unlike her relatives, he never wanted anything from her except her friendship and company. As their friendship deepened, V realized she could trust him with her heart. They eventually confessed their feelings to one another, and V experienced a love that was pure, selfless, and true. Ethan respected her independence, admired her strength, and loved her unconditionally. Few months later, they got married. On that day, she felt a deep sense of contentment. Her journey had come full circle, and she felt her father's presence with her, his love and pride surrounding her. With Ethan by her side, V continued her work, expanding her charitable initiatives and investing in ventures that aligned with her father's values. She and Ethan decided to open a foundation named after her father, the Andrew Foundation for Empowerment and Education. Through it, they provided resources for education, health, and community development, reaching thousands across the country. Every year on her father's birthday, V would organize a large event in their hometown, gathering community members, widows, orphans, and young students to celebrate his legacy of generosity. She would speak about her father, sharing his story and his lessons, inspiring the younger generation to give back to their communities. Over time, her relatives sought her forgiveness. They now looked to V with regret and remorse, humbled by the contrast between her accomplishments and their own mistakes. Though she held no grudge, V chose to keep her distance. She recognized that forgiveness did not mean she had to allow them back into her life. Her journey had taught her the importance of protecting her peace and surrounding herself with people who truly cared for her well-being.